More drama from the Republican convention in Cleveland as former candidate Ted Cruz is booed and Mike Pence accepts the vice presidential nomination. What can be done to end mother-to-child transmission of HIV? Scientists at the HIV conference in Durban have recommendations. And the latest gaming craze has retailers hopping on board the international poke economy. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gido. This is Africa 54. Indiana Governor Mike Pence made his debut Wednesday as the Republican Party's vice presidential nominee, delivering his formal acceptance speech at the National Convention. However, his address was overshadowed by Donald Trump's former campaign rival, Senator Ted Cruz, who refused to endorse the Republican presidential nominee. VOA national correspondent Jim Malone recaps day 3 of the GOP convention in Cleveland.
Mike Pence took the national spotlight on stage at the Republican National Convention.
I'm a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order.
Pence is a traditional party conservative who could help convince skeptical Republicans to get behind Donald Trump as the party nominee.
This team is ready. Our party is ready. And when we elect Donald Trump, the 45th president of the United States, together, we will make America great again.
Signs of that party rift were still evident Wednesday. Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who lost to Trump after a bitter primary battle, urged Republicans to vote in November, but he fell short of a formal endorsement of Trump, prompting some boos from the delegates.
Stand and speak and vote your conscience. Vote for candidates up and down the ticket who you trust to defend our freedom and to be faithful to the Constitution.
Move back! Move back!
Outside the convention hall, there were more protests Wednesday as some demonstrators were detained by police after a flag burning. A somewhat calmer scene played out in Cleveland's aptly named Public Square, where passionate protesters have gathered from around the country all week in support of various causes. Some have come to oppose Trump's plan for a border wall with Mexico, while others spoke out on both sides of the gay rights debate, including those opposed.
God is angry with your wickedness every single day.
And those in support.
They can say what they want. I'm still here. I'm not afraid to be out here.
For some, it was more about being part of a show, like Trump critic Marnie Halassa.
I think it's going to be fine. I was worried about coming here. I was so worried, but I mean, now I'm in Public Square. I'm talking to a lot of people. It's fine.
For Jesse Gonzalez, it's also about gun rights.
I hope to convince people, firstly, to vote for Donald Trump, and secondly, to try and fight to preserve our Second Amendment rights.
John from Cleveland doesn't like either major candidate.
I'm trying to express my displeasure with the choice of the two major parties, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. I think it's an embarrassment. I think we should be ashamed.
But independent candidate Vermin Supreme said he was available.
I hear there's a very strong anybody but Trump feeling here, and I am anybody but Trump.
Back inside the hall, Donald Trump was on hand for the Pence speech and now prepares to deliver his most important speech so far, his acceptance speech on Thursday night. Jim Malone, VOA News, at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland.
For more on the Republican National Convention, let's go to Africa 54's Vincent Makori in Cleveland. Vincent, tonight, before Donald Trump gives the speech of his life, tell us a little more about Ted Cruz's speech last night and also his non-endorsement of Mr. Trump.
You know, first, Esther, we have to acknowledge that he did give a great speech at the beginning. In fact, he got applause from the crowd until, of course, it became very clear that he was not about to endorse Mr. Trump. Well, today morning, at breakfast while addressing a delegation of the delegates from Texas, he defended himself and said he does not regret for what he said. You know, this is what he said. He is not in the habit of supporting a man who attacks his wife and attacks his father. Well, he says 3 days ago he spoke on the phone with Mr. Trump and told him very clearly that he will not endorse him, and that Mr. Trump did not insist that he endorses him when he comes here. Well, needless to say, this has generated debates on the television networks and on radio. People are saying, well, what does this mean for Ted Cruz? Some say it might undermine his standing in the party, projecting him as a bitter, vindictive, and selfish man who does not care about the party unity at a very crucial moment.
And Vincent, today is the last day of the RNC. What can we expect from Donald Trump's speech?
Well, this is the grand finale. It will be the big time, the great time for Mr. Trump. Of course, we can expect him to come here and say he is ready to go to work for Americans and make America great again. You can expect him to throw some of the sharpest criticisms against the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton. Of course, you can expect Mr. Trump tonight to also tell the delegates that he's grateful that they have brought him this far and that together they will win. People are saying he is expected, of course, to speak from a scripted speech, but Mr. Trump is known to deviate. Now, the question will be, will he sound presidential if he deviates from the written speech?
And briefly, what next for the Republican Party now that they have had an eventful week?
Oh, definitely after a short break, they will hit the campaign trail. And I think it will be a great moment now for Trump and Pence to bond, to go out together and sell their ticket to the people, knowing that Governor Pence just came in very, very lately. This will be, of course, for them a time to do that. And, of course, they'll be paying close attention to what transpires at the Democratic National Convention next week in Philadelphia.
We will definitely be following up closely on what's next for the Republican Party as you head over to Philadelphia for the Democratic Convention. Vincent, thank you very much. That's Vincent Makori, Africa 54's anchor, reporting live from the RNC in Cleveland. It has been apparent this week that there are very few African-American delegates or even visitors inside the convention hall. However, the few that are present are very passionate about Donald Trump and why they think he is the best candidate for president. Vincent Makori spoke with Charlie Husser, a delegate from California.
Why are you visiting? The question should be, how could you not be this energized? You're around your camaraderies. You see the energy in the room of people who believe in a man that understands the economic problems in our country, a man who understands structure and leadership, and Donald J. Trump is the man to do that.
Outside there, people say he has divided the nation. He has created animosities. He's racist. People call him all sorts of things. And you're a black woman. Tell me.
Let me ask you this. How can you make those statements when he's not a politician? How can you make such statements like that when you don't know him? How could you say that? Look, this man is not a politician. He's not going to follow protocol. He's going to follow things that knows how to build. He's a builder. We need to rebuild. We need to restructure. We need to re-relate and communicate. This country is failing for lack of communication. For every action, it's a reaction. For every non-action is the aftermath. We're living the aftermath of the Clinton administration from the crime bills that were implemented during the 90s that have devastated the urban communities. We need to look at those crime bills. We need to look at the lives of black people who were incarcerated on 3 strikes you're out. When he used that in the State of the Union address and then in the early 2000s, implementing how important we need to have that. Now we have these in the communities, black, white, Latino, Armenian, Japanese people who are incarcerated for little things like a blunt or something stupid. When we're not trying to build a better understanding, relationship, education, integrating back into the system when you had some earlier failures of maybe some felons, they don't really have a passion for a family. they're divided the black community. And for us to support her and allow her another opportunity makes no sense.
Now, they say she's good for the black community. They say the Republican Party is not good for the black community, and that Mr. Donald Trump and his party are actually a party of the wealthy. What is it?
Really? So black people don't want to be wealthy? Is that what you're telling me?
What they're saying is that they're not so compassionate for the black people.
But they feel compassion for a lady that calls us super predators, that looks at us and calls us predator. Do you know what a predator is? That's an animal that must take, heal, and yield. She says we must take these predators and have them heal. This is what she said in the early 90s and 80s. This was her philosophy. This was her thinking. Embedded racism in this woman's heart. We do not want people like that in our country. We do not want people like that with that ideology. But if they're going to be here, they don't need to lead this country. We need someone that understands a purpose, an ideology that is bringing value. Look at the extension of who they are. Your children are a reflection of you.
Now, tell me, what do you...
we know that Mr. Trump's children are a reflection of him, and we want America to reflect that as well.
How do you explain that he has actually divided the party, the Republican Party itself?
No, Mr. Trump didn't divide the Republican Party. The Republican Party needed a new leader. They needed change. This whole country needs a new leader. Look what this country has changed just on Bernie Sanders exposing the failures of Hillary Clinton.
And in today's business segment, we're highlighting Ethiopian Airlines, which has been operating from Washington, D.C. to Africa for more than 20 years. Joining me in the studio to discuss the airline's operations is Nigusu Worku, the Regional Director of Sales and Services, USA. Mr. Nigusu, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
The latest news this July is that you've added new flights from Newark, New Jersey to Lome, Togo to serve the West African region. Tell us a little more about that.
Yes, as you said, we have been serving Washington, Dallas for more than 20 years. Last year we added Los Angeles as our second gateway. And then on the 3rd of July we added Newark, which flies Newark, Togo, Lome, and Addis. It will really create connectivity between Western African countries and then the United States, New York area.
You have about 14 Dreamliners. The first one that left Washington, Dallas was amazing. People talking about legroom and how good it is. Yeah. And you have other Airbuses. What's the latest addition to your fleet?
Yeah, as you said it, 787 and A350 are really new generation aircraft that helps the world in many ways. One is they are eco-friendly, less carbon emission. That's for the general terms, but for customers, it gives higher cabin pressure, which means more oxygen, which means less fatigue, more convenience to passengers, wider windows, which is again makes flight very pleasant.
Okay, now when we look back at the training offered to pilots, technicians, and the crews in Ethiopia, you stand out as one of the best in Africa. Are you offering any of these services to other African airlines?
Yes, Ethiopian Airlines is now transforming itself into an aviation group in which it has its own aviation academy, which is the largest already. We give trainings to many African countries. We have actually many pilot trainings, mechanics in our aviation academy. We do give trainings.
So in terms of services for other airlines in Africa, do they come to you for services, or do most African countries have their own?
No. Actually, they are building capability to maintain their aircraft, but we are we are giving the service at a very good price, and we do maintain other African carriers' aircraft.
Mm-hmm. And what is your next plan, to expand Ethiopian Airlines and remain afloat in this kind of very competitive business?
Ethiopian Airlines has a Vision 2025 by which we will try to be a very competitive world-class aviation group in Africa. So our goals in the coming years is to phase in 40 aircraft into service. We have 41 on order. It's about opening destinations, about promoting business relationships, socio-economic relationship between the states and Africa. That's in general our plans.
And briefly, Mr. Ngusu, tell us about some of the challenges that you face as Ethiopian Airlines, especially operating from the United States to other parts of the world, given that other African countries, including Kenya, have really wanted to have such services, but it is not a go yet.
Yeah, it's really a long way between Africa and the States. It takes so much effort in terms of safety, in terms of marketing. Our challenge as an airline, we like competition. Competition is not a challenge. It's about getting more frequencies so that we'll fly into many African countries as many times a week as we want. That's a challenge. We are not opening up African skies even to African carriers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ngusu. Mr. Ngusu Warku is Ethiopian Airlines Regional Director for Sales and Services USA.
Thank you.
It's time now for a health report. And we turn to our health correspondent, Lino Mudu, with a look at mother-to-child HIV transmission. Lino?
Hello, Esther. Well, AIDS looks vastly different today than it did the last time the International AIDS Conference was held in South Africa 16 years ago. VOA's Carol Pearson reports on one major success in containing the virus.
There was a time when HIV-infected babies died. But now, all babies can remain AIDS-free, even though their mothers have the virus. This year, Thailand eliminated mother-to-child transmission of HIV, and other countries, like Haiti, are close.
Prevention of mother-to-child transmission is one of the greatest success stories in HIV research, but there's still 150,000 children in low and middle income countries who become infected with HIV every year.
The challenge is to get HIV-infected women on treatment and to keep them on it for life. But clinics may be too hard to get to or too far away. Getting the medicine might be a problem, and staying on it can be difficult too. Researchers at the National Institutes of Health have been working on ways to make it easier for women to stay healthy.
One of the research studies that we funded looked at convening for testing and treatment at a church instead of a clinic.
They found that other methods work as well. Getting men in treatment helps women stay on their medication too. So does getting tested and treated at home, and making HIV care part of regular health care. The official name for this approach is called implementation science. It's basically finding out what works to make treatment successful. There were 3 keys to Thailand's success. Dr. Tom Frieden explained them in a Skype interview.
The first was to make sure that they had the right technical package, that they were giving the right medications in the right way. The second was to ensure that they had the right operational systems, integrating it into maternal care, so it wasn't over to the side, but actually part of the routine care. And the third was political support, ongoing support.
The tools are there to eliminate mother-to-child transmission. The challenge is to make it happen. The goal is to bring the 150,000 new HIV infections that mothers pass to their children each year down to 0. Carol Pearson, VOA News, Washington.
Joining us in the studio for more is Dr. Stephen Lee, Vice President of Program Implementation and Country Management with the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation. Dr. Lee, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Also joining us is VOA's Anita Powell, who is standing by live via Skype in Durban, South Africa. Good evening, Anita.
Hi, Lenore.
Let me start with you, Anita. What is the latest on the conference? Anything significant on maternal and child health?
Right. Well, we've had some really encouraging news from South Africa in particular. As you know, South Africa is the nation with the world's highest burden of HIV. And they announced this week that they have brought mother-to-child transmission down to 4%. some scientists are saying, well, that's still 4% too many. But that is very, very encouraging. And it's like Carol said in her report, it's about implementing. We know that the science works. Having mothers take ARVs while they're pregnant does help prevent transmission. So it's just more implementation, better care, and it's looking very encouraging.
And Dr. Lee, what is your take on this? There is improvement on MCTC, and you are focusing on pediatric AIDS. What can you tell us?
Yeah, so there have been significant improvements in HIV transmission from mother to child. Great strides have been made in preventing pediatric HIV and reducing transmission from mother to child. An example of that does from the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation. Just yesterday, we announced that we've reached 25 million women with services since we've started as an organization in 1988. And it's our services, providing services to women to prevent transmission of HIV to their babies.
So, Anita, what are experts saying in terms of scaling up access for these women that are not able to receive the care?
Right. So one of the strategies is to try to bridge the gap and try to reach these women in social situations, as Carol said in her story, reaching them at church, reaching them in social situations, encouraging them to see HIV as just another part of your general health portfolio. You get checked for HIV, for diabetes, for HIV at the same time. So that's kind of part and parcel of what they're recommending.
Now, Dr. Lee, there is a report that came out. Although there are good news, the report says about 70 countries around the world are seeing an increase in HIV infection rates. Now, what role does mother-to-child transmission play in this, especially looking at pediatric AIDS?
Yeah, so, the major way that children become infected with HIV is through mother-to-child transmission. We have seen significant improvements, right? 58%, there's a 58% decline in new infections in children worldwide since over the past few years. But there's still that much needs to be done in terms of a decrease in that transmission. Now, we've just outlined some important aspects of reaching women. It's making sure that women have access to testing, they have access to treatment if they test positive, and then we're implementing strategies and approaches to ensure that they're retained in services once they get started on treatment. And that we're monitoring their progress and making sure that their medical outcomes and clinical outcomes are reflecting the treatment that they're receiving.
And Anita, did you hear anything about funding?
Right. This is one of the big discussions that swirls around every AIDS conference. Funding is always a major issue. As we've heard from the UN, the 90-90-90 target, which is 90% of people on treatment, 90% of people knowing their status, so on and so forth, is hamstrung by the need for, more than $20 billion, I believe, around the world in funding. And that's just nobody sees where that's coming from. So, while this news may look encouraging, while we may see a lower rate in mother-to-child transmission, we've got to keep up the money, and that's the big question right now.
Your reaction, Dr. Lee, on the money?
I totally agree. I mean, it's really important for us to maintain the resources that are necessary to achieve those 90-90 goals. It's both the financial resources, but also the human resources. We also need to make sure that healthcare workers have the knowledge, the skill set, the capacity to be able to deliver quality services. So I think resources is both a financial resources, but then also a human resources to ensure that we provide quality services to women and their families.
When you look at the way ahead, looking at the target by 2030, what do you see as priorities, especially looking at pediatric AIDS?
Yeah, I think some of the major barriers that currently exist are things around practices, laws, and policies that discriminate or stigmatize people who are living with HIV or people who are vulnerable to HIV. So addressing those challenges are really important. Specifically for women and children is addressing gender inequality and making sure that young women and young girls are empowered to be able to address the issues that affect them most importantly in the social context.
Okay, we have to leave it there, Dr. Lee. Thank you so much. Anita, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, and that was VOA's Anita Powell reporting live via Skype from Durban, and Dr. Stephen Lee, Vice President of Program Implementation and Country Management with EGPAF. And now that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Linor Moudou. Esther, back to you.
Thanks, Lino. Be sure to watch Lino Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, how the wildly popular Pokemon Go is changing the way retailers do business. We'll be right back.
I'm Milar Sega. I'm the host of VOA's The Correspondents, a roundup of the world's top stories with analysis from our dedicated reporters. It's really a conversation the same way that you would bring a friend to your home and ask them what's going on. And our correspondents will do that and answer those questions through their own eyes.
That appears a false choice in more ways than one.
We can't actually put you there, but we can come pretty close. In 30 minutes, we'll show you the world.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Pokemon Go has sent the world into a frenzy. Now business owners are trying to cash in on the action with what they call a new age of Poke economy. Some retailers have found a way of generating more profit by purchasing Pokemon lure modules beacons, attracting many players into their establishments. Some are offering discounts and coupons to Pokemon Go players. Others are offering gift cards to people who tweet a picture of Pokemon in their establishment. Marketing experts claim this is just the beginning of a growing market trend. In less than a week, Pokemon Go accumulated roughly 21 million daily active users in the U.S. Next up, gin production in South Africa is booming. With a history leading back to the Middle Ages, today's white spirit is enjoying a renaissance. Considering gin can be made in 24 hours, it is one of the quickest alcoholic beverages to produce. The manager of one of South Africa's distilleries says sales of the spirit are booming, including exports to Europe. And finally, why are Romanian beaches packed? 2016 appears to be the best year of Romanian tourism. Since the anti-communist revolution in 1989, a strong growing trend has been observed since 2014. So why the booming interest in Romanian resorts? One expert says Romania is attracting vacationers who would have traveled to France, the Middle East and North Africa, but who have been frightened off by recent attacks. And that's what's trending today. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching and good night from Washington.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords.
Here's a word you might have heard in medical stories.
Chemotherapy.
Until recently, the treatment all patients received was the same chemotherapy. Sometimes it helped, but sometimes it didn't. Researchers have been trying to come up with better treatments to shrink the tumors without affecting normal tissue or subjecting patients to the negative side effects of chemotherapy.
Chemotherapy is medicine used by doctors to fight cancer and some mental disorders.
Chemotherapy uses chemicals to kill cancer cells in a person's body. The chemicals sometimes are mixed in a liquid and injected into a person's blood.
Now, when you hear the word chemotherapy, you will know what this newsword means.